Hi guys, Laura Kuenssberg as a journalist can be a bit hit and miss. Sometimes she really does hold politicians to account, and at other times she lets them run roughshod over the interview where they go unchallenged. However, there are some other areas where she falls down as a journalist, and this is understanding basic concepts. When she interviewed Lord McDonald, a former permanent undersecretary at the Foreign Office, he explained to her that on one occasion he told colleagues that he had voted Remain. Laura jumped on this and claimed that it undermined his impartiality. Have a listen.
On this occasion, this solitary occasion, I decided to tell my colleagues, and therefore let ministers know, that I had voted to remain in the European Union. I felt that they would assume that in any case, so I decided to embrace it.
Having covered politics for more than 20 years, though, it's extraordinary to hear you tell us that you told people how you voted. Because that principle of impartiality is what holds the civil service together.
Okay, she doesn't understand what impartiality means. I think also a bigger problem is that Laura Kuenssberg thinks that everyone is like her. That she isn't able to separate her bias. She's a massive bias towards Boris Johnson. You know, we could even say she's a hack for Boris Johnson. And she thinks that everyone else is like that they're not able to separate themselves from that bias. Now, in politics, politicians are incapable of doing that. And it seems in journalism, it's the same. You pick a side and then you fight and defend that side. You fight for that side and you defend that side until you retire or something like that. We're talking about the civil service here, where of course people have their own biases. You'll have people who voted for Brexit, you'll have people who voted to Remain. That's indifferent in a sense to whether they can do the job or not, because they should be hired based on merit, not on how they voted or what their position is on a particular topic. You would hope that's the case. Now, sometimes it's not the case. Sometimes people slip through the net. People are hired based on their connections, based on what they believe. But generally, for a functioning civil service, you want people who will put their biases aside and do the job of government. Now, I think one of the reasons we've seen so much conflict between the civil service and politicians of late is that you have politicians who don't understand what they want, but push it through anyway. I want the civil service to implement that policy. And the civil service will either respond by saying, well, we can't do this because we don't have the resources, or we can't do it because we're breaking international law or British law. And of course, it's not presented in the media as the civil service saying this, because the civil service can't really, do press conferences and say, we're disagreeing with the government because of X. You normally discover these things when these people leave office or, retire. So you have politicians who would then go on the media, go to the media and say, well, I can't achieve X because of the blob, or I can't achieve X because of the civil service. They'll attack the civil service for doing its job. But this is where you need journalists stepping in and asking the right questions.
I was trying to maintain credibility and trying to convey a message to a group of people, most of whom I felt had voted to remain in the EU, that their personal feelings were beside the professional point. It was a personal decision. My board were not entirely comfortable, and all these years later, you can have a conversation about was it the right decision?
We can decide whether it was the right decision, but he was being honest. And he knew that the people around him probably already knew his position. So he wasn't changing something, he wasn't adding something to the discussion. It was just, this is where I stand. Now, I'm not defending him because he's a Remainer. I think he held on to his job because of his ability to do that. Like, you can apply this to other positions. Harriet Harman asked Rishi Sunak and his administration, do you want me to step aside because of tweets that I've made, comments in tweets I've made about Boris Johnson during the investigation into him? And the government said, no, you don't have to, because we understand that you are competent and you're able to do your job, irrespective of what you said about Boris Johnson in the past. This is a storm in a teacup. This is not a real issue as long as the civil servants are competent and able to do their job. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.